This is a zombie, an infected, rabid, and dangerous creature who has zero sense of self-preservation. Its only desire is to attack. And in today's video, we're breaking through the fourth wall, taking this zombie and many others from throughout video game fiction and inserting them into the real world, analyzing their strengths, weaknesses, and more. So, join me viewers, with magnifying glasses in one hand and a fully loaded AK-47 in the other, ready to wreck and observe. In today's zombie analysis, we will examine 4 zombie video game franchises: The Walking Dead, Project Zomboid, Fallout, and a surprising 4th game you may not expect. Now, let's begin and dive into the nuclear fiasco that is Fallout. For those unfamiliar, also known as those under a rock, Fallout is a post-apocalyptic franchise set in an alternate history where a nuclear war in 2077 devastated the world, leaving survivors to navigate a wasteland filled with mutants, factions, and remnants of pre-war technology. One of the ways humans survived is through vaults, bunkers created for various purposes, which included saving all the smart people, putting people in social experiments, and preserving valuable resources like gold. Those who were left out got to experience the nuclear explosion and its fallout. This included exposure to FEV, a virus that turns humans into large brutish monstrosities. Others became ghouls, humans who were exposed to radiation which caused their skin to deteriorate, also leaving them with no noses or ears. In the Fallout world, you can find 2 main variations of ghouls: normal ghouls and feral ghouls. Regular ghouls are deformed individuals who still retain the core aspects of their humanity. Their intelligence may be slightly affected or parts of their personality tainted, but for the most part they are the same. What might shock you is that they actually have a slight advantage over non-ghouls, which is that they can take extreme amounts of radiation. This is extremely helpful in surviving the radioactive wasteland as it makes any place habitable. But now, it's time to talk about feral ghouls. Feral ghouls are the violent variation of ghouls. They are still horrendously disfigured, but now they're on the attack. Feral ghouls are a common menace to players throughout the wasteland, always looking for a fight. Their immunity to the adverse side effects of radiation means they can only become more dangerous with exposure. One of the most dangerous variations is called glowing ones, which have absorbed so much radiation that they can release it on command. They can expose players to that dangerous radiation when making contact with them. But before I dive further into the extraordinary, intricate traits of feral ghouls, I have to prematurely burst the bubble. You see, feral ghouls aren't technically zombies. While feral ghouls share many similarities, some of those being their appearance and mannerisms, they're not zombies. Feral ghouls are still humans, but their radiation exposure has deteriorated their brains. They're no longer capable of rational thought, so they resort to primal instincts, which include attacking anything they see as it might be their next meal. One of the key factors of a zombie virus is transmission. How does this zombie virus spread to become a threat? That's the question that, unfortunately, feral ghouls don't have an answer for. But viewers, the Fallout universe does have a proper virus to judge, and it's called the Scorched Plague. The Scorched Plague appears in Fallout 76, so if you haven't heard about it, don't worry. Now, lucky for us, I've been playing the game recently and diving into its lore. And let me tell you, these Scorched are no joke. But first, let me explain where the plague began. Before the Great War, there was a secret organization called the Enclave. This organization performed experiments in secret in the Appalachian region and created infected bats. The bats at first weren't extremely dangerous, but when exposed to high radiation levels, they became Scorch Beasts. Scorch Beasts are monstrous, mutated bat-like creatures that are a terrifying aerial threat, emitting toxic radiation and wreaking havoc anywhere. Now, the creatures were reasonably contained in a lab at first. However, a man named Thomas Eckhart released the plague on Appalachia for personal gain. He was hoping that the beasts would trick an automated system into believing a nuclear response was required, giving him access to America's nuclear arsenal. The plan never came to fruition, and the region was stuck in an awful battle against a new threat as if there weren't enough already. Now, what is the Scorched Plague? The first and most important part of the Scorched Plague is its hive mind. While the virus can infect many different types of animals and humans, all of them are linked to one hive mind. Every decision on whether they attack someone or something is based on this. And if you're wondering who's controlling the hive mind, it's the Scorch Beast Queen, the largest and most powerful creature in all of Appalachia. Now, what happens to humans specifically when infected? Firstly, the skin will become blood red, with lesions and ultracite erupting all over the body. Along with this change, their mental awareness will disappear. They start succumbing to the hive mind and following its commands. What also makes Scorch unique from other viruses is that those it infects can still use weapons. If you're wandering through Fallout 76, you're guaranteed to meet a group of Scorched threatening you with pistols, shotguns, and melee weapons. Now, the Scorched themselves don't present a massive threat. Comparing them to other zombies like Dying Light's Volatiles and Last of Us Bloaters, they aren't that strong. They have pretty standard health, and their only real threat is shooting from afar, which is dangerous, don't get me wrong. But bloaters are tanks loaded with massive amounts of health, and volatiles have a very niche weakness in UV lights. I'd say the real threat of this virus is its ability to infect the surrounding wildlife. Just imagine the dogs, bears, wolves, moose, and any land animal you can imagine being infected by the Scorched and spreading the virus. This excludes scorch beasts, which are still massive threats in their own right, raining terror from above and spreading the virus in life and death. There's just one thing I want to point out about the Scorched Plague. You see, in Fallout 76, the Scorched Plague is pretty well contained to the Appalachian region. It seems the Scorched Plague hasn't spread outside of the region, and in the one case where it did, the infected person was immediately eliminated. Now, one could argue that there hasn't been a Fallout game since 76, and Bethesda hasn't had an opportunity to expand on the Scorched story, which is true. I just have one counter-argument. One of the first quests our character gets when exploring the wasteland is to finish the work of Dr. Hudson, a lead in the scientific quest to create a medical safeguard against the Scorched Plague. While the project was never completed, our player picked up from where she left off and finished the inoculation. Then, our player delivers it to the different factions throughout Appalachia, decreasing the total population to which the Scorched can spread. Why does this matter? Well, if a group of researchers in a post-nuclear world can almost craft a cure for the Scorched, I'm confident our current world, with its resources, could effectively combat the Scorched Plague. There's never a guarantee, but I find it highly possible that a united medical effort to develop a counter for the Scorched Plague would be successful. Another important note about the Scorched Plague is that those it infects don't last forever. The final stage of the Scorched Plague infection is the petrification of the body. Here, the body becomes ash with ultracite green crystals bursting out of it. So, in a hypothetical world where the Scorched Plague is quarantined in one area, the Scorched humans will have a set time till their expiration. Animals infected with the Scorched Plague have no similar petrification process, but humans do. So, in my internal simulator called my brain, I'd imagine that if the Scorched Plague were to break out, the region would be quarantined. Anything leaving the area would be gunned down or bombed to bits. A vaccine against the plague would be developed and distributed worldwide, but the Scorched themselves would be impossible to remove. You see, a sneaky trait about the Scorched that many of you may not know is their immunity to nuclear fallout. They'd be able to survive any nuclear warheads thrown their way, and if any of the local governments were reasonable, they'd be sure not to fire any warheads into the region to not wake the Queen. The fewer Scorched beasts flying around, the better. So, with all that accounted for, let's come up with a rating. For infectiousness, I'd give the Scorched Plague 2.5 Nuka-Colas out of 5. Its ability to spread quickly through both nature and humans is incredibly devastating, no matter where it spreads from. The only problem is that the infected human population has an expiration date on them, and while modern animals are dangerous, they are nowhere near as dangerous as their infected radioactive counterparts, such as deathclaws, mirelurks, and wendigos. I'd predict the virus ravaging whatever area it initially infects, but spreading outside that set zone might be a bit more challenging. And then there's the impending vaccine that can make spreading a lot more difficult. Now, when discussing strength, there's a lot to dissect here. The Scorched are extremely unique, as their infected population is able to make use of weapons like firearms and knives. Where some zombies need to get close and personal to do their damage, these nasty turds can take cover behind buildings and structures in order to take out enemies. What also makes the infected population dangerous is their linked hive mind. Within the Fallout 76 game, there's an instance where Scorched beasts and Scorched overran a faction of humans at an airport. It was a complete slaughter of the group, but what's important is how it was done. It was a coordinated attack. So, if this were to occur in the real world, what if the Scorched mounted a targeted assault to break through a quarantine zone? That's a real problem. So, the Scorched Plague is a substantial threat. Is it the strongest? No. That's why I'm giving it 3.5 mini nukes out of 5. Scorched beasts are strong, local infected wildlife can be strong, and Scorched with guns are tough. They're just not the strongest. Now, it's time for that surprise game I mentioned earlier. During the life cycle of my previous 2 zombie videos, there were comments from fans of all different franchises telling me I got something wrong or that I should cover another franchise. A name that appeared in the comments quite a bit was Guts and Blackpowder. Personally, I have never heard of this name in my life and had zero idea what people were talking about. I'm making videos on some of the greatest zombie franchises and you're telling me I've never heard of this one? Well, to my surprise, it's not a standalone game, but rather a game found on Roblox. I know, I was shocked. I've played some of the games on Roblox, and I hadn't found a single game with story, gameplay, or characters that could even be remotely compared to some of the classics. But hear me out, Guts and Blackpowder is more than just a Roblox game. Let me break it down. Unlike other games in the zombie genre, Guts and Blackpowder isn't set in the modern day. It's instead set during the Napoleonic Wars in the early 1800s. The virus that breaks out is called the Blight, and its impact on the wars is intertwined within the gameplay. Specific battles, locations, ships, and more from real history are worked into the game. I think this is amazing. I would love for more games to take events from history and put their own spin on it with new monsters, characters, and events. In Guts and Blackpowder's case, the Blight causes opponents to team together and peace treaties to be signed to counter this new threat. In fact, this new unique threat is something I've only seen in one other zombie game, or mode if you want to get picky. The Blight's expansion method involves killing any remaining survivors and then reviving their corpses. It's not a traditional virus. It's actually tied with Christianity. Hell, the place where sinners are taken after death, is full or not receiving any more spirits. That's why the spirits of the fallen are trapped within their undead bodies. It also explains why crucifixes and other religious items tied to Christianity can be used to prevent infection or damage zombies. Do these items save everyone? No, the Blight is still a disease with a high mortality rate that kills anyone it infects. But what kind of zombies make up this undead Robloxic horde? Well, the Blight zombie pyramid has a bottom layer of shamblers. Every game has these, and they're the basic zombies just shambling and stumbling after their targets. Nothing specific or remarkable to highlight about them other than that in large hordes is the only time they pose a significant threat. The next tier would be runners, both regular and viral variants. As the name suggests, these zombies are much more quicker and more agile than shamblers. They tackle players and attack viciously, hoping to turn them into one of the horde. Now, the following zombies are going to be ranked on the pyramid in no particular order, as these next ones are all dangerous. Bomber zombies are a pretty straightforward variant. Their big twist of carrying explosive barrels adds more madness to an already chaotic battleground. The next tier consists of zappers, a zombie variant that gives the zombies a gift of a giant heavy axe to use in combat. Combining that with the extra damage they can take, they're not something to be overlooked. Lucky for survivors, they lack speed, but their shocking strength can overpower anyone. And now for the final tier of zombies, igniters. This variant features zombies with lanterns and a great throwing arm. The lanterns these punks throw spawn large fires on the floor and take up space that survivors could have used to help dodge the oncoming horde. While their flaming lanterns are incredibly dangerous, it's important to note that they return to basic zombies once the lantern is thrown. Now, if we were to take those exact zombies and throw them into the real world or compare them to other franchises, they're not blowing my mind. I'd be comfortable giving them a strength of 2.7 Robux out of 5. The variants add to the Blight's credibility as a threat, however, I can't in good conscience rate it as high as I did with other franchises. In contrast, the Blight's threat as an infection cannot be understated. A virus that requires minimal damage to possible targets to spread and create new zombies is powerful. Also, pairing that with the fact that there are spiritual forces at play that we don't fully understand means that creating a vaccine or finding a cure is improbable, earning the Blight an infectiousness rating of 3.5 Napoleons out of 5. While the Blight might not be the strongest, I have to give credit to the series creator, Fuse Studios, for creating something as unique and cool as this. But let's shift our focus back to a more popular franchise like Project Zomboid. Project Zomboid is a gritty, isometric survival game set in a zombie apocalypse where players must manage hunger, health, and mental state while trying to survive as long as possible in a hostile environment. The game is unlike anything else I've ever played. It takes pride in minor details like managing small scraps, bleeding, reading specific books to cook and build, and so much more. Personally, I was not a big fan of the game, but for this video, I wanted to learn more about the game and its zombies. Unfortunately, I came upon a massive problem pretty early in my research. There's no actual confirmed lore within the Project Zomboid world. There are scraps of a story that players can put together and interpret as they want, but there's not much as far as 100% confirmed information like what we have in Dead Rising or Left 4 Dead. So, thanks to these YouTube videos for giving their thoughts and some of my own internet research, this is my understanding of what happened. The zombie outbreak began in Knox County, an area in the United States. The US government was aware of a potentially deadly virus outbreak and sent personnel to quarantine the area. They even cut the phone lines within the county to prevent communication between residents of Knox County and the outside world. It seemed as if the military planned to quarantine the area, properly assess the virus, and prevent anyone outside the city from learning about the illness. The poor souls inside the county were fighting for their lives, trying not to get bitten by their undead neighbors. With no communication from inside the zone, the rest of the world was forced to accept the word of the president and a general as accurate. Also, Project Zomboid was set in 1993, meaning social media and smartphones weren't used by average consumers. Hence, Knox County citizens couldn't just upload some horrifying zombie footage to TikTok. They were completely cut off, and it was up to the government to communicate what was happening. Sadly, the general and president decided to lie to the rest of the world and communicated that the virus was nothing threatening and that the quarantine was just out of precaution. US citizens and the rest of the world naturally wanted some more info on the virus that could soon threaten them, but the government provided none. More days passed, and as citizens rioted demanding more information and other nations placed embargoes on the United States, the virus continued to spread. Hordes of zombies would overtake soldiers outside the quarantine zone, adding to the number of infected. The virus, now labeled the Nox virus, also mutated days later to spread via airborne transmission. The physical biting of zombies was no longer needed to spread the virus, and people unaware of their condition could spread it to their family, friends, co-workers, and innocent bystanders. This new change to the virus caused nations to destabilize within the following weeks. They began shutting down their borders, blowing bridges, and opening fire on their citizens. This essentially spells out the end of the world as we know it, with billions of everyday people now wandering around as undead corpses. Is there hope for humanity? Yes. You see, the premise of Project Zomboid is that the player is not only a survivor of the apocalypse, but also immune to the airborne variant of the Nox virus. We're part of a small population, and as long as we don't get bitten by a zombie, we'll survive. Interestingly, as I assessed Project Zomboid, I noticed some parallels to another zombie franchise. I couldn't quite place my finger on it, so I had to watch my own video, which you can too in the top right corner for part 2, but as I was watching it, it hit me. Project Zomboid draws a couple similarities from Left 4 Dead. Both infections can be spread via airborne transmission, which causes a rapid collapse of society. Within both franchises, there is also a small population that is immune to the effects of the disease. There are some differences, like how the immune aren't totally safe from turning in Project Zomboid, but in both franchises, if a horde surrounds you, death is imminent. So, considering how I rated Left 4 Dead, I think Project Zomboid is just a weaker variant. Left 4 Dead's iconic mutated zombies create an incredible variety of enemies, each with their own dangerous trick. Project Zomboid has regular zombies, and that's it. Sure, some zombies are faster than others, but the lack of any mutations doesn't give them any hope for a high strength rating, so I give them 1.5 frying pans out of 5. They're not strong compared to other franchises like Left 4 Dead, Halo's Flood, Call of Duty Zombies, Dying Light, the list goes on. Concerning infectiousness, the rating is definitely higher, but once again, comparing it to its stronger cousin, it's not as powerful. One of the plot points of Left 4 Dead that made it so twisted was that the immune within the franchise are asymptomatic carriers. This means that while they don't show any symptoms of the virus, they can spread it to those who aren't immune. Project Zomboid hasn't hinted, at least according to my own knowledge, that it's the same. The immune within the game are protected from airborne transmission and will not transmit it to those who aren't immune. This leads to an infectiousness rating of 3.5 rolling pins out of 5. I genuinely believe if you threw this virus into the real world, we would all be screwed. Similar to how events played out in the game, I believe governments would try to cover things up to prevent mass panic, only allowing the virus to mutate over time. The infectiousness aspect will cause the world to destabilize. I just don't see the zombie's strength being a prominent factor behind that. It also raises the question of whether an immune population, down the line, could push to retake the world, because the zombies haven't mutated into powerful monsters. Decomposition is a killer, and with time, a unified attempt to fight back the undead could prove successful. This is why franchises like The Last of Us and Left 4 Dead sit a couple tiers above Project Zomboid. And since we're mentioning franchises sitting above Project Zomboid, I can guarantee this franchise is above it in popularity, and that's The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead is synonymous with zombies. This franchise, built on a post-apocalyptic world, has garnered millions of views through television, comic books, and video games. Most importantly, for today's video, we're focusing on the series developed and published by Telltale Games. The Walking Dead video game series is a choice-driven narrative adventure set in a zombie apocalypse where you control characters trying to survive. The story focuses on emotional decisions, relationships, and survival as you navigate a world filled with both human threats and zombies. The game was made when The Walking Dead was at its peak popularity. The main show ran for 11 seasons, which is wild considering the modern show's life cycle. All that means is there's more to talk about. Now, let's get into some Walking Dead. Firstly, for those unfamiliar with The Walking Dead, it's set in a world identical to the modern day. Like many other zombie franchises, The Walking Dead's virus is spread through saliva. But there's another unique element. When anyone dies of semi-natural causes, they will immediately become a zombie. Die from the flu? Zombified. Die from a gunshot wound to the leg? Zombified. Why does this happen? Well, from my sources, the Walking Dead virus lies dormant in every human's brain and only becomes active when an infected saliva enters the bloodstream or when the host's brain dies and it then takes over, turning that person into a walker. Walkers are pretty simple zombies. They're just moving around looking for their next snack, waiting for a visual or auditory cue to investigate. In fact, The Walking Dead is known for having pretty simple zombies with no variations. I've never seen a single episode of the TV show, but I've been told by friends who've seen the show that the zombies are an afterthought. The zombies are slow, uncoordinated, and extremely easy to manipulate. The players only ever see this version of the zombies within the game. While playing the game, I questioned how anyone becomes infected. The zombies' poor coordination and lack of speed mean fighting off a zombie is incredibly easy. Of course, being cornered by the zombies or having a horde circle you is extremely dangerous, but it seems easily preventable with some intuition. And remember, when I make videos like these, I try to predict how our current world would survive a zombie virus like this. With The Walking Dead's virus, there's no doubt that the world would immediately fall into chaos. Large cities would struggle because so many people could become zombies. Crowded conditions mean that leaving the city would be near impossible, as traffic and the horde would shut that idea down instantly. There's also the fact that an estimated 150,000 people die every day, which means the horde is constantly expanding each day. If that number held consistent for a week, that's a little over 1 million new zombies every 7 days. And don't forget that a majority of these new deaths are occurring in larger cities, only adding to my theory that major cities would fall quickly. However, let's think beyond that. Sure, the world would immediately plunge into chaos, and the following year would be hell on earth. Millions, possibly teetering on billions, could become infected. This doesn't change the fact that modern military technology puts up a good fight against these zombies. Here in the United States, I could see military troops quickly clearing through towns and cities, eliminating the infected and rescuing survivors. Because of this, I theorize that the world would just swap city centers. The rural areas of countries become safe havens due to the lower population there is to infect, and major cities would become desolate for presumably decades before anyone sets foot in them again. Also, let's not forget that there are ways to combat the horde's expansion. Within the Walking Dead world, people who die from natural causes can be prevented from becoming a zombie by disconnecting the central nervous system, simply known as the brain. Whether it be a gunshot, an axe, whatever you choose, it's the only guaranteed way to prevent someone from turning after death. In a post-apocalyptic world, funeral ceremonies might not be too common. That's just an educated guess, and we could see survivors picking up new survival traits like dismembering or disposing of the dead in a new manner to prevent people from reviving. Things of this nature are necessary for humanity's survival, and I believe we'd make the uncomfortable changes to survive. Another way to prevent someone from turning is to amputate the bitten limb. An example is if Steve has his hand bitten, and someone immediately chops it off. If he doesn't die from blood loss or an infection, there's a chance Steve survives and just has to accept his new life with one hand. This happens in the Walking Dead game, where our beloved character Clementine is bitten on her wounded leg. AJ, an important person to Clementine, can cut off her leg and prevent the zombie virus from killing her. So this method can save lives. This is why, despite all the love and popularity behind The Walking Dead, I can't give its zombies too much love. Regarding infectiousness, there's no doubt that the dead reanimating into zombies is extremely dangerous, but that's only for a short time. It wouldn't be long before something similar to what happens to the characters in The Walking Dead occurs, where the secret is revealed and everyone knows that the dead reanimate no matter what. For this reason, I'm giving The Walking Dead an infectiousness rating of 2.5 katanas out of 5. The zombies spawning from the dead is compelling, and the fact that anyone can become a zombie adds another layer to this. There's no select immune population like in Project Zomboid or other zombie-related media, so no one is safe, which helps The Walking Dead earn its rating. Now, in terms of strength, The Walking Dead gets a solid 1.5, if even that. After playing so many zombie games and doing so much research on video game zombie franchises, I couldn't help but feel underwhelmed by walkers. They're basic zombies with no speed, strength, or unique mutations, earning them this low ranking. Sorry Walking Dead fans, but if you feel I got this wrong, the comment section is always available. Now, summing up our rankings from today's franchises, the weakest game is The Walking Dead with a total rating of 2, next is Project Zomboid with a rating of 2.5, then Guts and Blackpowder takes second with 3.125, and the winner is Fallout with the highest rating of 3.5. Comment section, what do you think?